Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Let's start our story with a funny story that happened on a submarine. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. It's a bunch of guys in a metal tube with atom bombs. So not me, but a buddy of mine did this, and I'd like to share. When you're underway on a submarine for an extended time, you're traditionally allowed to purchase a no-shave chit. This is normally given for medically necessity and not to shave for various reasons, i.e. folliculitis, etc. Subs throughout the years let guys grow facial hair under because, one, who's going to see it, and two, it's a great way to raise money for parties and stuff. These chits have an obvious expiration that requires you to shave your face prior to pulling into port. The COB, chief of the boat, head enlisted, is the overall person on board who sanctions these. Yes, the captain is overall in charge, but will typically default to what the COB recommends or says for these types of matters. Prior to pulling in, it's safe to say that more than a few reminders are out to that all hands must be clean-shaven prior to stationing the maneuvering watch, actually on the surface about to enter port. So it's pretty much impossible to say that I didn't know I needed to shave. Now that we're through with all the backstory and pleasantries, enter my buddy who happens to be rather hairy and grows a magnificent beard. He happens to have been near the COB for the maneuvering watch. He shows up about 5 minutes late, just to make sure the COB was there with the full beard in all of its glory. It's also worthy to note that my buddy has been on board for a few years and is not considered a new guy. The COB looks at him, and you can see the blood pressure starting to rise and says along the lines of, "What effing part of all hands must be clean-shaven prior to the maneuvering watch do you not understand?" With the biggest crap-eating grin, he looks at the COB and says, "All hands are clean-shaven," and proceeds to hold up and show the back of his cleanly shaven hands to him. At this point, everyone is silent in anticipation of the butt-chewing that's about to take place when my buddy says, "Just kidding," and runs off to go shave his face before the COB could get a word in to start the chewing. My buddy was pretty much told not to do it again, and that was the end of it, because essentially it was funny. And our next story. Want to screw me over and berate me on the job? Two can play at that game. I worked at a restaurant as a prep cook around a year or so ago. It's a popular chain, but I'm not going to hint at the name. Anyways, my job was essentially just prepping ingredients, dealing with small stuff like salad and desserts, and keeping the line cook stocked up. It's not a crazy stressful job, but I have a severe anxiety disorder that I wasn't medicated for at the time, so sometimes I would reach my limit and need to go cool down for like 5 minutes or so. So while I'm working there as a prep cook, there are multiple managers, each for specific things. They're each very kind and fair to me, but there's only one that seems to actively make it his job to put me down without actually verbally doing so. I'll call him David, not his real name. David is the definition of a middle school bully in the body of a 50-year-old heavy smoker. He would constantly cut corners and not do stuff that he would go crazy if we didn't do, not cleaning up after himself, leaving his drink right by the grill line, effing around on his phone, on the clock, etc. And he was never called out on it to his face because the people that were aware of it didn't want to start a grudge with a manager or were just apathetic to the situation. However, despite all this annoying stuff that's more or less just tedious to deal with, this is where it gets bad. For the first month or so that I was working there, all my managers, including David, were really nice and understanding towards me. Eventually, the general manager noticed when I was having a freak out during a particularly stressful shift, and I had to explain to her about my condition. She was incredibly understanding and told me that if I didn't want everyone knowing about it, she would just tell the other managers and shift leaders so they'd cut me some slack. I agreed and thanked her profusely, and everything was relatively fine for a while. Then David drops the nice guy routine. At first, I chalk it up to my anxiety and distrust of others, and that I must be interpreting his actions wrong, but that doubt goes away fast after he ramps his game up. It starts with small things, like David getting visibly irritated with me for very small mistakes, but then quickly turns harsher and legitimately malicious. Doing things seemingly on purpose that'll F me over, micromanaging everything I'm doing, and berating me for even the most minuscule mistakes. saying things like, "Come on, Giles, you should know this by now. Use your head for once." The worst example of his treatment of me that I can remember is when we were working during a particularly busy lunch rush. I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but it was something like this. D. Giles, it's the lunch rush. What are you doing? M. I'm doing my orders. I just have a lot right now, so I'm a little backed up. D. I don't care about the tickets. I'll get someone else to take care of them. I need you to go make more chicken. I'm a little irritated at the time, but I don't know him well enough to be confident that arguing wouldn't end with me getting disciplined or something, along with my anxiety that was starting to develop into a panic attack, so I just turned around wordlessly and started to do what he said. I crap you not, less than 5 minutes later, David comes storming over to me, fuming. D. What the hell are you doing, Giles? M. I'm doing what you told me to like 5 minutes ago. D. Don't you see all those tickets at your station? Why aren't you dealing with them? M. Because you told me to go make more chicken and that you get someone to handle it. I'm not proud to say that at this point in my life, I was a giant pushover and a coward. Could not handle confrontation whatsoever, and I would actively avoid it by any means necessary. At this point, I'm trying not to cry, and I start to get lightheaded and feel the telltale signs of the beginning of a panic attack. David sees how distressed I am, and he looks even more irritated. He scoffs and says, "Fine, I'll take care of your mess." After I finish my task, I run into the bathroom, lock the door, and sit on the floor to try and collect myself and calm down. The rest of my shift, he just gives me glares or irritated looks. Now that all the lore is out of the way, here's where the revenge comes in. Chiefly among the things that David did to me was actively keeping me from leaving at the end of my shift by using whatever he could to do so. My record is 3.5 hours longer than I was supposed to be there, and it was because of him. So how it worked was that regardless of our position, servers, dishwashers, cooks, etc., we weren't allowed to leave until a manager said we could, and then had to wait to be walked out by someone with the authority of at least a shift leader, regardless of if our work was done and everything was clean, and we were supposed to leave 5 minutes ago. If a manager wanted, they could force you to stay and either do literally nothing — they sure like to chew you out if that was the case though — or do the work of someone else. On one particularly bad day for me, I was having bad anxiety and was grasping onto quitting time as my light in the darkness. The time for my shift to end came. As I was just finishing up everything I was assigned, and I see David. "Hey David, I'm all finished up. Can you walk me out?" He laughs at me and says, "Are you crazy? If I can't go home, neither can you." Keep in mind that my shift ended 5 minutes ago, and he was likely going to run another 4 or 5 hours. Again, being the pushover that I was, I just took it and went to the bathroom to try to cool down before I melted down in front of everyone. I had to stay for 2 extra hours for no reason and would constantly either not tell me to do anything indirectly or force me to do menial tasks that weren't even part of my job. Eventually, this treatment played a factor in me using the small bit of courage I had left, writing a note saying that I quit and that I was really sorry and that it wasn't their fault at all, and walked out after telling the coworkers that I liked goodbye. Fast forward 5 or 6 months later, I was unemployed and needed a job. Every position that I applied to was entry level, but I got no calls. After a month of this, I realized that I had to eat crow and try to get my back at the restaurant. I eventually did so, but came back as an overnight janitor. The fact that I'd be working completely alone with no one else around for most of my shifts, combined with the fact that my anxiety was miles better now and I'm practically a different person now because of it, this was way better than my previous position. This is where the revenge kicks in. While I was training with a guy who'd been working the position a long time, he mentioned that the manager that's closing can only leave after everything on their checklist was done, and the opening manager had to stay until all their stuff was done. I didn't think much of this until I started mentally piecing together the checklist they had to do. Over a few weeks of just watching them do their stuff while I worked, then it finally clicks, and I get the dumbest, most petty idea to get back at David possible. After I put together this plan and decide to actually do it, I wait until shifts where David closes, and I strike. After people slowly start to clock out and it's only a few people left, David constantly asks for help with stuff that I know's on his checklist, and I always make up an excuse to not be able to help. Mostly, "I would, man, but if I do, I'll be way behind on my stuff." This is a lie. I have lots of time to spare after I finish my checklist. I start half-butting specific things that would make him have to stay longer to finish, but do it in a way that there's no way he could call me on it, doing it purposefully. David is supposed to leave at around 11 every night. I make sure that he doesn't step foot outside the kitchen until 2 in the morning. The cherry on top is that the janitor for the night has to walk out the manager for some weird reason. Because of this, when I know that David is starting to get ready to go, I make sure to take a long bathroom break or hide somewhere for as long as I can before it's obvious what I'm doing. The final part of this is the time when he jokingly complained about how long it's been taking him to finish every night and how I should try to help him finish more. I don't miss a beat, and with a smile I say, but if I do that, I'll have to stay later to finish my stuff. If I can't leave, neither can you. To this day, I still do it sometimes. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.